Hey you guys, I wanted to drop in here and leave you a quick message. I've been having a really interesting conversation on my personal Facebook page. Over the years, one of the things that I've noticed is that when I post about race in my personal friendship circle, I get all these inbox messages from white people, which is just this whole interesting, dynamic. And so really recently I mentioned that on my Facebook page, and I asked my white friends to please comment on my page, not in my comments, about what that's about. And many issues came up, and among them came up some stories around racism that they are witnessing and that they are struggling to know how to handle. And so this is very overt 1965 stuff like in the league that their kid plays in, the N-word is being used, and it's being used by kids who are under 10, and they're struggling with how to navigate it. And so it just brought up for me the reality of how mean the world is to our children, and particularly our sons. And so we know this from research, and we know this from our own anecdotal experiences. And, it's really interesting to me now, all the white people who are starting to chip in about it. Now, what they do in the moment of the encounter is a whole other conversation, but I'm finding tremendous consensus in my friendship circle that this kind of stuff is actually not uncommon at all. And the overt bigotry and 1965 style behavior. And so it just brings up for me the importance of being kind and warm and caring to our children when they're in our own care. This is the hug them and tell them you love them approach to parenting, which is very different from how some of us parent now. Some of us were parented in the past, or maybe our grandparents parented, and it's certainly very different from the legacy parenting style among African Americans, which was very demanding but not particularly warm. And so the reason for that legacy style was very important. It was actually the most successful parenting style during slavery, because slavery was off the charts demanding and off the charts cold and cruel. And so the parent of a black child back then knew that if they were too warm and cuddly and nurturing with their child, and they were sold away from their child or killed, or their child was killed or sold away from them, or just the daily reality of having to go work in the fields and leave your own children so that you could produce for massa. And so they knew that a child who was cuddled and coddled would not be able to survive, particularly alone. And the worst case scenario, of course, was being sold away from their parent, or their parent being killed, and the child having to survive on their own. And so this was the most successful parenting style during slavery itself. It was also the most successful parenting style during the industrial era, and because a factory worker has the same kind of situation. It's very demanding, not particularly responsive. Nobody cares what a factory worker, or nobody cared in the past what a factory worker or a laborer thought. It was just shut up and do what I tell you, right? And so for some of us, since that was the most successful parenting style during slavery and during Jim Crow and during the industrial era, for some of us that parenting style has carried forward into today. And so what I want to share is that parenting style is no longer effective. It actually backfires. And what we do want to be doing is being very warm to our children. And these stories about that, even white people admitting about the cruelty that our children are facing overtly at other white children's hands just goes to underscore the importance of loving our children up while they're in the environments that we can control, holding high expectations for them, and helping them reach our high expectations, not lowering our expectations to the world's level, but holding the high expectations and supporting them in getting there. But mostly our homes, our places of concern or care, our churches, our community groups, our civic organizations, our family, our parenting organizations are the places where our children need to know that they can come to be loved. Because they're likely, by all counts, to encounter extreme meanness and cruelty in the world. So hug your baby and tell them you love them.